So we all know that Ronaldo has joined Juve. Yes, yes, very exciting, incredible news. The rest of the Serie A are on notice. But what about Real Madrid? How do they replace a player that scored 50 goals for 9 consecutive years? He scored 450 goals in 428 games at Los Blancos. He's probably the greatest player, or one of the greatest players ever graced the Bernabeu. But just how do Real Madrid replace Ronaldo? I'm here joined wonderfully by the one Kristen Hennig, a man who's forgotten more about football than you will ever know. I promise that. That's a fact. How are you doing, Kristen?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me, Flo.
So I think the most poignant question really is, do Real Madrid have enough in their changing room already to cope with the loss of one of the greatest players to ever do it?
Well, I think that's the most pressing question, is that he hadn't even held the shirt up at Juventus, Ronaldo, before we were talking about who would come in and replace him. And I think the names jump out very quickly. You've got Neymar, you've got Mbappe, Hazard, even Harry Kane, and that's going to scare you as a Tottenham fan. But I think the viability of those deals becomes a little bit more difficult when you start to drill down on it, because actually I think when it comes to PSG, unless financial fair play dictates they're not going to want to sell either of their star attackers, I don't think Tottenham are going to give Harry Kane up very easily. And then I think you're looking maybe further down the list at someone like Mauro Icardi of Inter, who actually is a viable deal, is a very good forward. I would argue is able to play a similar role to Ronaldo at least. But then it's a case of, do you want to splash that cash, or do you want to give an opportunity to some of the youngsters that they have in their ranks?
How much are they saving then by not having Ronaldo on the wage bill? What kind of wage was he on? I mean, and could that saving be used to perhaps prize Neymar or Mbappe away from PSG?
It could. I think this is the thing. He was one of the most highest paid players in the world, and removing that from any club is going to leave a sizable gap to potentially fill and play with if you want for a new signing. I think you could very easily convert the wages of Ronaldo into someone like Mbappe or Neymar. And in fairness, I think we've seen a fairly long, drawn-out search for Neymar and the way to get him to Real Madrid. We constantly are reading stories about Real Madrid wanting him and wanting to bring him, and that the fact he's actually left Barcelona has made it a more possible deal, because I think in the wake of Luis Figo all those years ago, it's been harder and harder for those two to ever do deals. And even that one, the Figo one, was famously very much a forced deal. It was not one that Barcelona wanted to do at all.
What do you anticipate Perez is planning, though? Because obviously, my assumption is that he wouldn't have wanted Ronaldo to go, but it's happened, and he has to placate the Real Madrid support. He's got to stand up against the traditions from which the Real Madrid, their legacy, what they are as a football club. They have to sign, they have to replace someone on a comparable level if there is a player out there. What does Perez do, in your opinion, here? Is his legacy going to be based on how well he can replace Ronaldo?
I think that's a fantastic question, because this is the thing with Real Madrid. They're a very political club, whether it's the elections or not. So much about them is optics rather than actual sort of pragmatism or what feels like the best idea. They do obviously have Vinicius Jr., the Brazilian prodigy that's just arrived now. They've also signed Rodrigo Rodriguez from Grêmio, another Brazilian forward, different type of player, but again, a young attacker that you would hope matures into something. You've even got the likes of Martin Odegaard, who I don't think is anywhere near the first team picture, but again is another player that they invested in. You imagine with one day looking at having to transition this squad, because that's the other thing to consider here, is that eventually Real Madrid were going to have to let Ronaldo go at some point. He was either going to retire or he was going to leave. And I think realistically, for someone like Lopetegui, if he'd kept Ronaldo, in theory, it would have been making a short-term decision. It would have been, okay, we'll have this huge financial burden on us, but we'll have someone that feels reliable. And inevitably, in 12 months' time, he'd have been facing the same crisis anyway. So it's a very bold move from Real Madrid, I think, first and foremost. Yes, amazingly, they've made a profit in strict money terms from buying him for 80 to selling him for 88. They've removed the sizable wage. And that's where this key comes in, is that in theory, you would almost want that same kind of fanfare. I remember when Ronaldo was unveiled with Di Stefano and the Bernabeu and just the sort of circumstance that went with it. You would almost expect the same again, but I think that's going to be almost impossible to recreate unless it is someone like a Neymar. And even then, I think that's going to be a very difficult deal for them to do.
The fact that Ronaldo has left Real Madrid, does that pose other problems in the starting lineup? But Benzema has always been an unlikely number 9 for them, in as much as, he's a great player. No doubt he would fit into the vast majority of teams in Europe. But at Real Madrid last year, I think it was 9 goals in 35 games, a paltry return, but was very often a foil for Ronaldo, and they complemented each other amazingly well. Is there another issue about having to sign a number 9 that's going to be more effective without Ronaldo than Benzema possibly is?
Well, I think this is the task for Lopetegui when he comes in, is essentially decide what position you want to fill, because we've seen Ronaldo play out on the left and cut inside. We've seen him play in a 4-4-2 with Benzema as well last season. So it's a case of him deciding, I think, what formation he wants and what gap that leaves. There's been talk about James Rodriguez. Coincidentally, he's the last player they signed for more than sort of 45 million since the 2014 World Cup. They've not really, I would say, splashed the cash in that way that we often assume with Real Madrid since then. So I think it's important for him to kind of sit down and almost work his squad out. The problem is he doesn't have a lot of time. The season is rapidly approaching. And if, hypothetically, let's just say he wanted to sign Harry Kane, he's going to need to do that pretty quickly because the English transfer window shuts very soon. And there's no chance, I think, that Tottenham are going to want to sell their marquee player without being able to secure a replacement. And that's just one of the reasons I think that deal isn't viable. There are similar, I would say, reasons and cases you can build for why each of that main target that we've talked about is not going to be possible for Real Madrid at this precise moment. And then that's before I think you even start to talk about actually just replacing what Ronaldo gave them. Because yes, he took a lot of shots. I think he was taking the most number of shots per game in his career last season. And even last season was such a duality for him because you go first half of the season, I think by his own standards, he was poor. He was kind of hitting where he was supposed to, but the numbers weren't what we were used to. And you go to January and AS have this poll where 67% of the people asked wanted him to leave. Now he has this second half of the season. He scores that fantastic bicycle kick against Juventus of all people and really pushes the level up, sort of spins things around just as his doubters were starting to have a bit of chatter amongst themselves. And I think this is what Real Madrid now have to focus on is how do we replace everything that he gave us? Let's even just strip away the media stuff and the sort of social footprint he brings with him just on the pitch. How do you replace all those different quantities from a player who has been sensational for Real Madrid? There's no other way to bill it.
One player that might be able to do it was Eden Hazard. He's talked about potentially moving Chelsea. The noises he's making wouldn't be great, greatly received by the Chelsea fan base. Could you see him fitting in, and would he go some way to fill in the gap?
The problem I think I have with that, it's not that Hazard's quality isn't there. It's kind of that he's not a goal scorer first and foremost. In the same level, I think that's what you have to stress. Because I think 16 in the Premier League is his best ever. He's never really got past that. And at the same point, when I look at him as a player, for me, his strength, his USP, if you will, is his ball carrying ability. It's not necessarily being that between the post forward who will get onto headers, who will take shots, score free kicks, these kind of thing. That was what Ronaldo was. He was that sort of complete forward. He had gone on a journey himself. He was a winger, as we know, in England. He was very trick heavy. I think almost a little bit wasteful with tricks at some points in his early career, but he just really streamlined and refined his game and became so efficient. And when I try and compare Hazard and Ronaldo, it's just not a very good stylistic match. I think they're both very good players, but in such different ways that I don't think the transition would be nearly as smooth as fans would hope for.
No, are we overlooking what Real Madrid already have? Bale has been, some would say, in Ronaldo's shadow their entire time. He's had issues with his injuries, but when he's been at the top of his form, he has been mercurial in the most extreme. He's doing things that most players can't. You look at the scissor kick in the final against Liverpool and the goals that he scored previously, and you just think there is still a special player there, and perhaps without the spectre of Ronaldo, that Bale could come on. And then you look at Asensio, he's going to be an incredible footballer. Future Ballon d'Or winner has been mooted for him. And Isco, who's well loved by Lopetegui as well at international level. And you mentioned James Rodriguez. Now that Zidane's gone, there's perhaps an open door, although I think he has to do one more season in Germany. Perhaps they have enough already?
That essentially, yes. I think if I'm very frank, that's what leads me to the conclusion that actually it's better to wait. I know that the very nature of Real Madrid is not that patient. It's almost that they want to go and now have this big moment again where they announce someone. But actually, I think you look at Benzema, who I know his goal scoring record hasn't been incredible, especially last season, but he's a bit of a worker. He's a facilitator, is Benzema, in the same way for the French national team, let's say. It's not the same style, obviously, but it's about opening up avenues for other players. And I think absolutely, you look at the relationship that Ronaldo and Bale had when Ronaldo was at Real Madrid, it wasn't always smooth. It was a little bit fractious at times. I think they struggled to share the stage in that sense. And with Ronaldo now gone, you could argue now's the perfect time to push Bale into that slot and essentially tell Benzema to operate in the same way he did for Ronaldo, but now for Bale. And the fact that you mentioned Asensio is another great shout. I think, as we've talked about already, Vinicius Jr. is there, Rodrigo is there. They have, I would say, younger players who they can start to mould and start to just be a little bit more of a developmental club, because I think for a good period of Perez's tenure, they've been about buying the ready-made star and then maybe elevating them up to that world-class level. I think it's important for them to really start to be a bit more financially prudent with stuff. And even if you want to go out and make that huge statement signing that we're talking about, an Mbappe and Neymar, give it 12 months, see what PSG's financial situation is like, because at the minute, it is very much up in the air. That's the thing. I'm certainly not heralding the destruction of PSG from a financial standpoint, but it's under review. It's something that is yet to be decided. Even the most confident of PSG fans, I think, will admit a 5% of doubt. So it's worth maybe just taking a pause for a second and just assessing the situation, probably back in next summer.
Well, there you have it. Should Real Madrid go out and splash out on Neymar and Mbappe? Should they wait and see what the PSG situation is like in a year? Can Bale be the man who comes to the fore and takes Real Madrid by the scruff of the neck to Champions League glory, Ballon d'Or glory, and all of the rest of the trappings that come with it? Kristen, thank you so much for joining us. Remember, Bull Street is coming back for the new season, bigger than ever. Remember to like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.